Pat Fitzgerald fired yesterday afternoon, shortly after we finished the OutKick show. And I had not spent much time talking about the Pat Fitzgerald story because, candidly, I was at a wedding in Chicago when all this news came out on Friday. And I didn't really have a lot of time to read up and sort of familiarize myself with the case overall. I think this is an example, in my opinion, of a couple of players deciding they wanted to take out a head coach. And I think the allegations here, to the extent that they are true, are not sufficient enough to have led to Pat Fitzgerald's firing. If they were, I think Northwestern should have announced a firing immediately instead of waiting. The university president, the athletic director, they suspended him for 2 weeks after they reviewed this university council investigation. And then they decided to fire him on Monday after a lot of people got upset over the weekend at the fact that he wasn't fired. And to me, own your decision, okay? You can't allow the reaction to change your decision. In fact, if you do that, then I think the president and the AD should be fired. Look, here's the reality. If you are in a position of leadership and you are being paid substantial amount of money, ultimately what you are being paid for is, at almost every profession, your judgment. So if you're the university president and the athletic director and you reviewed these findings and you found out that nothing else had come out, and you decided, hey, we don't need to fire the guy, and then people get mad on social media and you fire him, what do I need you for? You're not actually making a decision. You're just following whatever the herd says should happen. And so I think Pat Fitzgerald, based on the allegations that have been out so far, won't sit out very long. I think he'll likely get another better job. He'll go rehab himself with Nick Saban at the school of rehabbed coaches, or he'll go somewhere else. 99.9%, I think this is significant, of the Northwestern football players and formerly associated individuals have all come out and said that they support Pat Fitzgerald. That seems consequential to me. So I think Pat Fitzgerald will get another job, and I think he'll be fine. Now, some knucklehead Alabama fans, and I probably shouldn't even have to say knucklehead Alabama fans because it's such a predominant number of Alabama fans, have said, oh, you treating Pat Fitzgerald different than you treated Nate Oates. Yeah. Nate Oates had a player that brought a loaded handgun to a murder scene after being requested to bring a loaded handgun to his teammate, and then a mom was shot with that handgun. That's a lot more serious than allegations of hazing. So yes, my expectation for coaches is don't allow players who are involved in murders to be members of your team. Hazing, while it shouldn't be occurring, is far less significant of an act than murder and being associated with a murder. I can't believe that some people are so dumb they can't see the difference there. And, you know, I look around sometimes and I wonder, like, how have I had so much success? And the reason is lots of people in media are really dumb, right? I work hard, yes. I've got a lot of jobs, yes. But ultimately, many people in media are just dumb. And that's why I've had so much success. Because over time, intelligence wins. And I look around and I'm like, some of the people in media are such knuckleheads. They're really dumb. And I look at this Pat Fitzgerald case, and I actually see it connected to the Art Briles case. Football is interesting, right? Because there's over 100 players, to say nothing of the support staff and everybody else, that are involved in playing football. and I don't think enough time is spent on this. You have 85 scholarship players. You probably have at least 20 walk-ons. You probably have at least 20 managers. There are a ton of guys on every football team. And so the idea that every football coach knows about every single thing going on with his players is just not true. I think it's more likely to be true in basketball, right? Because you can put everybody on a basketball team inside of a van and you can drive from one place to another. You tend to have, as a coach, a lot more of a personal relationship with a basketball team, with a baseball team, with a group of people where there aren't very many of them. But if you talk to any coach in America in college and you say, hey, of your 85 scholarship players, how many of them do you know really, really well? It's hard to have a deep relationship with 85 different scholarship players, plus all the walk-ons, the managers, everything else. I've heard it analogized, and I think it's often true. Football's an aircraft carrier. Every other team in a college athletics is a speedboat. It's relatively easy to turn a speedboat in the river. It's really hard to turn an aircraft carrier. So what I saw happen with Art Briles, nobody ever actually looked at the evidence in the Art Briles case. They wanted Art Briles to be evil, conniving, sexual assault, cover-up-er. And then you go look at all the evidence, and first of all, a lot of the sexual assault cases got overturned, or there were never any convictions in those cases. Also, it is the case that Art Briles was never really active on social media and didn't even really understand the mob that got him fired and that demanded that he never be allowed to have another job in coaching. And what's wild about this is Baylor paid out Art Briles all of his contract. And this is so important because it's like nobody ever looks at the evidence. Do you think Baylor would have paid out Art Briles millions and millions of dollars if they could have fired him for cause? This is me putting my lawyer hat on here, and I suspect this will be a huge part of what I would imagine will be a big lawsuit that Pat Fitzgerald will end up bringing. The difference between for cause and without cause. Being a really bad coach and losing a lot of games, if you get fired, you still get paid all of your money. So let's say you have a 4-year, $20 million contract left, and you go 2-10, 2-10, and you still have 2 years left on your contract and you get fired. You're being fired for being a really bad coach, but you still get paid the remainder of your contract. You would, in theory, under the example I just gave, 4-year, $20 million contract, 2-10, 2-10, you're fired. You'd still get paid $10 million. If, however, you are found to have violated your contract and are fired for cause, that's not losing. Losing is not cause. It means you violated the terms of your contract. Maybe you were committing NCAA violations. Maybe you engaged in criminal behavior. Then you wouldn't get paid out. Tennessee right now, for instance, is in the middle of a dispute with Jeremy Pruitt, arguing that they fired him for cause and therefore they owe him no more money under his contract. Said he committed NCAA violations. They found out about they're not going to pay him. Baylor paid Art Briles. It'll be fascinating to see what ends up happening with the Pat Fitzgerald case, but it is consequential that Baylor paid out Art Briles all the money that he was owed under his contract, yet most people never actually look at the evidence, and so they still believe that Art Briles shouldn't be allowed to coach. So I am skeptical that most people don't look at the evidence. Most people don't see what the facts are, and therefore their opinions are not very consistent and often not very intelligent. And then you add in that many people, particularly in college, are directly connected to one program or another, and they don't care what that program does, but they want to throw the book at another program, right? So there's very little consistency. And I've used this example. Some of you have been watching and or listening to me since I was doing local radio in Nashville, back when I was doing 3HL. I used to tell college football fans this all the time when I did that show. I would say, okay, whatever your most hated rival is, pretend that they did what your school is accused of doing by the NCAA. This is back when you used to get NCAA punishments all the time. I said, whatever the difference is between what you think should happen to your hated rival and what you think should happen to your school, that's bias, right? Because it's the exact same scenario applied to your school. Most college football and basketball fans are cognitively unable to be consistent in their application of penalty and fact because they have such a rooting interest for their favorite team. Their favorite team and their favorite players can do anything. Brandon Miller can bring a loaded gun to the murder scene, and a mom can get killed after he's asked to bring a gun to that scene. And Alabama fans will say, oh, Clay Travis is biased for even talking about this. But if Auburn's football quarterback brought a loaded gun that was used to kill a mom after he was texted to bring it, and the news came out right before the Iron Bowl, Alabama fans would say this is unacceptable that this quarterback is playing. That's bias. If you're not applying the same standards to every program, whether it's your hated rival or your beloved school, then you are guilty of bias. And most fans are guilty of bias. Remember Ray Rice, after he knocked out his fiance? People don't talk about this. He wasn't suspended for a while. In fact, he wasn't suspended till people got furious at Roger Goodell for not suspending him longer. Ray Rice showed up at training camp and got a standing ovation from Baltimore Ravens fans. Ray Lewis may well have murdered two people, and he has a statue outside of the Baltimore Ravens stadium. Think about that. Ray Lewis, charged with double murder, flipped and testified against another defendant. Nobody's ever been convicted of double murder in that Atlanta double homicide. We know two people got stabbed to death. Ray Lewis hit his suit, kept playing, has a statue outside of Baltimore Ravens Stadium. Ray Rice gets standing ovation when he shows up for training camp. Fans are amoral. If you make it more likely that your team will win, fans will almost accept anything. I get it. I'm from the South. I grew up an SEC fan. SEC fans will forgive any violation if it makes it more likely that their team is going to win a championship or beat a rival. I really believe that. And that's what you have to keep in the back of your mind as you analyze all these stories.